Thank you so much for tuning into the Bloody FM interview with Stephen Graham Jones, author of the Indian Lake Trilogy. Discover the horrors of Proof Rock, Idaho, the setting for Jones's modern masterpiece of terror. The final installment, The Angel of Indian Lake, is out now, so go pick up your copy today. The following interview contains light spoilers for My Heart is a Chainsaw and Don't Fear the Reaper. Hi everyone, I'm Shelby Novak, and Jenn Adams and I are here today for Bloody FM with Stephen Graham Jones, author of The Angel of Indian Lake, the finale of the Indian Lake Trilogy. Hi Stephen, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's wonderful to be speaking with y'all. Thanks for having me.
Well, and I am a co-host of the Losers Club podcast, which is a podcast about Stephen King. Mm-hmm. And hot off the presses, I know that news just broke that Stephen King is going to be voicing part of the audiobook for The Angel of Indian Lake. I am a huge audiobook fan. I listened to the audiobooks of both My Heart is a Chainsaw mm-hmm. and Don't Fear the Reaper, and I loved them. And I know you're a King fan as well, right?
Oh, yeah. I've been reading King since, I guess since 88, probably, right around there. And yeah, I've stuck with him the whole time, and I dig his stuff. And it's an amazing honor to have him, do a little thing for the audiobook. That's so cool.
I think I would just die if that were to happen to me. And I also saw that Barbara Crampton is going to be one of the voices too.
Yeah.
Are you going to be voicing anything? Are you going to be reading your acknowledgement again?
Definitely the acknowledgements, and I have yet to hear the final version, so I'm not sure if I'm doing anything else or not.
Well, and I don't know if you can tell us or not. I have if I'm thinking about the voices that voice Don't Fear the Reaper, mm-hmm. The voices kind of going in and mm-hmm. out. I have a guess about what King is going to be reading. Do you know, or can you tell us?
I do know, but I don't think they have released me to say yet. No.
Okay. Well, we'll be on the lookout for that news, and I just love his voice so much. So cannot wait to hear. Yeah. If it's the part I have in mind, I think it would be a great fit for that. We are talking about The Angel of Indian Lake, which is the third book in a trilogy, including My Heart is a Chainsaw mm-hmm. and Don't Fear the Reaper. And so my question is, what keeps drawing you back to Jade Daniels?
Man, it's, I never planned on this being a trilogy at all. And it became a trilogy when Joe Monty at Saga, my editor, when he said, what if you didn't kill everybody at the end of Chainsaw? And so, I stubbornly wrote him a version where not everybody died. And turns out that opened it up into a trilogy. So I'm eternally thankful to him for prompting me to do that. But what keeps drawing me back to Jade Daniels, I think it's that I want to let her finish her development for good or for bad. Mm-hmm. I feel like, at the end of Chainsaw, that's sort of, it's a ending of the dramatic line, but it's not an ending of the narrative. It's more like the end of Act 1, and then Reaper is Act 2, and then Angel is Act 3. So I feel like I'd be doing her a disservice if I didn't let her go the distance,
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And I think about one of my favorite horror trilogies is Scream, mm-hmm. Scream 1, 2, and 3. And mm-hmm. I know Scream 3 is kind of maligned. Mm-hmm. I happen to love it. And I think that the ending of Scream 3 is just a perfect ending for Sydney. But I also hear Randy Meeks in that movie saying, anyone can die, Sid, even you. Mm-hmm. So did you have kind of a no holds barred approach going into the third chapter, knowing that it was going to be the end?
I did, yes. I knew that, as a horror novelist, with any horror thing I write, if all the main players are still alive at the end of the book, then I've done something wrong. I haven't had the nerve to face down what needs to be faced down. So yeah, there were hard decisions to be made and things that I immediately regretted, but if they're good for the story, you got to do them,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, that brings me to my next question is, mm-hmm. So as an author, and no spoilers, I'm trying not to spoil the book since it's mm-hmm. just coming out. So you not only had to say goodbye to Jade after 3 books, but to Letha as well. So mm-hmm. how did that feel like to wrap up Letha's story?
Oh, I know. In the first installment in My Heart is a Chainsaw, I kind of thought her story was done, but then
I thought her story was done too.
Yeah. So did I. That's why I was so interested. Yeah. She would just started as this object of Jade's slasher dreams and mm-hmm. turned into so much more.
I know. Yeah. And then in Reaper, she's with Banner. She's got a daughter. Her and Jade are best friends, and I really like that their friendship can be like the core of all this. That means a lot to me.
Yes.
It means a lot to me that Jade gets to have a friend, if that makes sense. It makes me so
Yeah.
happy. And yeah, so I had to figure out a way to let Letha continue with her arc, but do so in some way that doesn't, detract from great Jade's development, which has to be primary, and
Mm-hmm.
and it was
Oh,
fun and it
definitely.
was hard, and luckily, her like development in this third book was able to let me kind of answer what's been a continual problem through the first two books, if that makes sense.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love Final Girls. I love
Mhm.
slashers. I'm actually wearing a Final Girl
That's good.
sweatshirt
That's
today.
good.
They're what drew me into horror to begin
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
I'm also a Jennifer who doesn't go by Jen, or a
Oh,
Jennifer who dyes my hair.
yeah.
And I don't want to go too deep into some of the
Hmm.
other things that I have in common with Jade, but I felt really seen by her,
Hmm.
and I just really fell in love with this character. She sees the world through slashers, and
Hmm.
you mentioned saying goodbye to characters, and I think part of what makes a final girl, and what makes us drawn to them is that they have to deal with so much trauma.
Hmm.
And I love the use of slashers and kind of slasher revenge as we watch Jade kind of deal with some of her trauma. So I was just curious, like, how do you see slashers playing a part in Jade's life, and why do you think she's so drawn to these films?
I think she is drawn to the slasher genre because she feels there's a lot of injustice in her life and her situation. In high school, she
Mm-hmm.
especially felt that. And what slashers do is they rebalance the scales. They come in with a machete and they kill who needs to be killed. And when Jade is 17, she thinks there's a lot of people who need killing. But you're right. Then after something rises and there's a big massacre on the lake while watching Jaws, um, it does. The Indian Lake Trilogy does have to deal with the trauma of that. Like I feel like I would be
Mm-hmm.
doing everyone a disservice if I pretended like, well, we just reset and now we're gonna do it again. Like, but it
Mm-hmm.
seems like most slashers do pull a reset between installments such that we can start out from zero again. But there's that accumulated trauma. It builds up and builds up, and it's got to be dealt with, or it's going to find its own way out. And not just for
Mm-hmm.
Jade as a final girl, but for the community as well. There's a
Yes,
if you've had a
definitely.
massacre in your town, then it's going to be hard to get away from that. You don't, and who do you even want to get away from it? It becomes like part of
Hmm.
your identity in a way, and you've got to learn how to work it in such that it doesn't corrupt or corrode.
Yeah. It's like the
Oh,
scars,
definitely.
and
Hmm.
I love the and again, we're not going to spoil anything,
Hmm.
but this does occur a little later. You talk about the meaning of Jade
Hmm.
and how it smashes and it
Hmm.
reforms, and I thought it was such a beautiful description of this
Thank you.
character.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's one thing I love too. Like you talked about
Hmm.
community and this small community.
Hmm.
You said it in the small town of Proof Rock, which almost became a character in
Hmm.
itself. And I'm from a
Hmm.
small town, so I really identified with the prying eyes and
Hmm.
gossip and all of the things that come along with a very small town. So, is there a reason you were drawn to set it somewhere like this?
I needed it to be somewhere isolated enough that there wouldn't be like a SWAT response team. So,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
a small town, like like the isolating like sequence is always a big part of the slasher. Whether it's the high school reunion or a house out in the woods during a storm or whatever it is. So I needed something like that, and I just decided to build it in rather than to stage it. But
Hmm.
tell you the truth, the real reason it's a small town is probably that I grew up in small towns, and so I know
Hmm.
the rhythm, the pulse, and like you say, the fact that everyone remembers that you're the one who peed their pants in first grade and you never outlive that.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, for better or worse, because sometimes it's those bonds that you form when you're so young and people that you've known forever through all of those hard things, but also the good things. And that's why it feels so hard to say goodbye to some of these characters too.
It really does. I feel like I've gotten to know the entire town at this point, you know?
I know. Yeah.
I know.
And I mean, I finished. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no. I mean, it's so tempting to turn like Proof Rock or Indian Lake or all the whole, like, what is it, Fremont County. It's tempting to turn it into like Faulkner's Yoknapatawpha County, where there's just stories happening everywhere for 15 or 20 books, you know. But I feel like that would be. I mean, it's really tempting to do that, but I feel like I'm mean, but I'm not that mean, you know, to have like
they've been through enough.
Yeah, exactly. They've earned some time off, I feel like, you know.
They really have. I mean, even after My Heart is a Chainsaw, I think they deserved a little vacation.
I think so. Yeah.
And it's interesting you talking about it almost becoming part of your identity, especially because this book does start out with a resident of the town really kind of trying to put her stamp on the world through telling the story of her town. And it's a really interesting kind of meta cycle, like element of the story. If you look at this as the third piece of a trilogy, and it's part of why I love 90s slashers so much too, is because they're referencing old ones. And, you know, that's, I think, a hallmark of these books. Was that kind of an intentional, like, meta quality thing with the documentary?
Yeah, definitely it was. Like, I think all of us who play in slasher land are challenged by probably the opening of Scream 4, where you're falling through successive levels of reality and you don't know where your footing is, you know? And so I think, I think that prologue in Angel is probably playing with that a little bit, but it's also, and I don't even know if I should say this, but why not? You know, when Jade first appeared to me, like the first draft I did of Chainsaw, it was called Lake Access Only. She was not there at all. When I broke it all down and rebuilt it from the ground up, I started with, again, I had Indian Lake, Terra Nova, Proof Rock, and the Sheriff. And so I was like, I decided to start after the massacre. And so there I was, you know, in my head, standing on the pier, looking at all these bodies floating in the water. And then Jade kind of stood up from the water, and she had a notebook, and she was writing down how this all looks to her and why and who this person was, because she was an insider, and she was going to use this book she was writing as her ticket out of Proof Rock. And so that character in the prologue to me is kind of like a revival of that early version of Jade, you know, and that's why Jade, to me, that's why Jade kind of invests so much in that student, that girl, you know.
That's so interesting to think of a different world than with the one we got with Jade. That's
I know.
Really fascinating.
Yeah, well, the original narrator for the novel was a 10-year-old kid in an iron mask, you know.
Oh wow. Like Halloween vibes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, I wanted to ask too, so a lot of horror either picks paranormal or picks real life slashers, and you've really melded the two. And you know, Jen and I were actually discussing before we talked to you, was some people get a little bit gatekeepy as well when it comes to slashers, like they don't want paranormal in their slashers, but you've beautifully melded both of these together. And what gave you the idea to even inject some paranormal aspects? Because throughout, I got to say, through Heart of the Chainsaw, I was like not expecting it to actually go supernatural the way it did.
Yeah, and you know, there was 2 or 3 versions of My Heart's a Chainsaw where it never went supernatural. You know, there was a version of it where Letha Mondragon's father Theo was the one doing the massacre. You know, but I finally decided that everyone, like, the trick with a slasher is you're basically writing an Agatha Christie, and the trick there is you gotta keep your cards hidden, you know. And slasher fans know the formula, the conventions. They know it so well that if you give them 3 pieces, they can guess what piece 12 is going to be. And so
that's very true.
I found that the best way I could like keep the reader on their back feet, or keep them like where they could be potentially surprised, was to do just what you're saying, to go back and forth from, is it a revenge slasher? Is it a supernatural slasher? You know, and kind of modulate between the two. And in My Heart is a Chainsaw, I had to have Jade, for all of her slasher cue, I had to have some of her guesses be a little bit wrong, but very much in keeping with what she emotionally needs at the same time. So they had to be valid to her, and then in Don't Fear the Reaper, I had to figure out all over again how to surprise the reader, which became exponentially more difficult with Angel of Indian Lake. And the one, if I got like a guiding light for Angel of Indian Lake, I think it would be two different texts, and that would be Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, and and it would probably be the sixth installment of Nightmare as well, where you remember it opens with Freddy on the Wizard of Oz broom, and he's cackling like the witch. And it's over the top ridiculous. There's so much going on, and because there's so much going on in that sixth installment, it's really hard for the audience to give weight to this or this or this to try to string a narrative through, and so in Angel, that's kind of what I tried to do. I tried to make it where you don't know, that bad stuff's happening. It's probably larger than life, like supernatural, paranormal, something like that. But there's so much going on that you don't know what to give credence or weight to. But it was a lot. The problem with that is it's a lot to manage and juggle and balance,
Yeah, I can imagine.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I will say, I think you did it very well. And you surprised me all 3 times. I did not see.
Same, all 3 times.
Thank you.
And I really thought I knew. I was like, oh, it's Theo. I thought it was Letha for a little bit.
Yeah, I admit, in Chainsaw, I was kind of like, well, I've already figured it out. I guess I'll keep going. But, I'm so glad I did. I did not see it coming a mile away.
Oh,
I really didn't.
That's wonderful. Yeah, my goal with Chainsaw was I wanted the reader to think they were in one story, and then they get in that swan boat with Letha and Jade, and they slowly pedal into another story. That's what I wanted.
That's exactly what it felt like. We stumbled onto the wrong movie set.
Yeah.
Like, wait, we're in this movie over here. Which movie is this? Yeah.
But the right one, because it's like that's where the emotions are leading you.
Exactly.
When they get in that boat, that's when I fell in love with both of them. And I was like, it went from just being a story I was really invested in to like, these characters really mean something to me.
I should find a way to do a photo shoot in one of those swan boats. I never thought of that. That'd be fun.
You really should. That would be fantastic. You really should.
You could do the photo shoot, and they could like marry you together, like jumping out and Oh, that would be like that picture of Jamie Lee Curtis where she's kissing her own forehead. That would be so cool.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Well, one of the things that I really love about this whole trilogy, and one of the things I love so much about Jade and Letha is kind of this exploration of what a final girl can be. Who is the final girl? What should she look like? What should she act like? And Jade kind of realizing that she can become the center of her own story, And I'm going to read a section. And again, no spoilers. It is from the end, but you say on page 419, you said, "There's final girls everywhere, aren't there? I used to think they were the rarest breed, the finest vintage. But everyone who's got something to fight for, they'll fight for it. Never mind if it's a fight they should win. Should doesn't always matter. What does it that you run screaming into this thing and don't stop until it's over?" And that was when I started crying in the last chapter. And I didn't stop until the end. But I want to ask about Jade as a final girl, how you see final girls. Has your idea of a final girl evolved as you've written this trilogy?
It has, yes. Like the trick with Jade is that like most of the world, from seeing so many different iterations of the slasher, she has invested, or kind of, I say invested, really she's kind of been brainwashed into subscribing to this notion that the final girl is up on a pedestal. She's this beautiful princess, athlete, supermodel, scholar, bottle feeds kittens, like everything, every possible good aspect you can have. That's the final girl. And that's just what we see over and over, like Ripley, Lori, Nancy, all of them. And none of them are bad. I'm not saying that at all. But I think the function the final girl can serve for all of us is to be a model for how to push back against the bullies in our lives. We're all not going to face somebody in a hockey mask, but we're going to face a bad boss. We're going to face a teacher who pushes us around. We're going to face somebody in the hall who wants our lunch money, whatever it is. Those are the bullies. Those are the slashers in our lives. And Final Girls teach us that you can push back, you can fight. But part of that is the Final Girl space identity has to be a space that we can step into. And if the Final Girl is on a pedestal that's so high, we can't get up to her, and Jade feels like the Final Girl is irreproachable. She's perfect. And she knows or suspects or thinks that she's not perfect. And therefore she doesn't qualify to be a Final Girl. And hopefully if the readers take anything home with them after this trilogy, I want them to understand that being a Final Girl is not about how the world sees you. Being a Final Girl is what you've got inside, That's what I want.
It's definitely, I wish these books had been around when I was a teenager, because I feel like teenage me would have identified so much with Jade and would have gotten so much out of that sentiment that you just shared with us, because I feel like I had like the same ideas of like the world as Jade, and I was the same weird, watching slashers, doing all that, not having a ton of friends type person. And hearing that and seeing her evolve through the books and realizing she doesn't have to be alone, when she realizes Letha and her can be friends and she doesn't have to be alone. And like you said, the evolution of the Final Girl is in what it is, what it's supposed to be, is just stunning.
Thank
beautiful.
You. I think if there is, like, if I ever say any of that explicitly, it might be in that part you just read. Or there's also that bit in Reaper where her and Letha are crossing the ice, and she says the horror movies get it wrong. It's not about one Final Girl; it's about a whole sea of Final Girls.
Yeah, and that's, I think you mentioned, wanting Jade to have a friend, and that's, as much as I love Laurie, and I love, I also love that we get a nod to Adrienne King as Alice, because I think she's kind of an unsung Final Girl. They feel so lonely. And that's one of the reasons I think I love Sydney so much, is that she bands together. And I feel like that was an evolution of Final Girl kind of lore. And I feel like this trilogy is an evolution of it too. It's moving the genre forward.
Well, thank you. And it was important to me too that, of course, Jade is Blackfeet and Letha is black, so the two girls who are at the front of this charge are not in keeping with all the Final Girls we've seen for 40, 50 years,
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
I hope, I mean, I don't know if this is something you'd ever want, but I could picture the movie in my head. I can I was like fan casting myself, which have you done, by the way? Have you had any like fan casts of your own books?
I talk to a lot of Hollywood people and they always ask me, who do you want here? Who do you want there? And I never really have any idea, the only one that I think would actually work pretty good is, Idris Elba. I think he'd be a pretty good Theo Mondragon,
He would be. He's handsome. He can, he would. Oh my God. Can totally pull off that rich, like, that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, could we get Zendaya as Letha?
Oh, that would be nice.
Zendaya would be perfect. I mean, the tall model, like, Zendaya is basically exactly what you described.
You're right. Yeah. I never thought of that.
Let's make it happen.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, she could totally do that. I never even considered that. That's good. And,
I think Zendaya can do anything personally. She's a Final Girl in my heart.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask about your relationship to slashers, because one of the joys, I think, of reading these books and being a horror fan, I love A Bay of Blood. I feel like it doesn't get mentioned as much as it should. But I love reading all of these references. And I'm curious, like, what are your favorite franchises, favorite slashers? Who are your favorite Final Girls?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I think my favorite Final Girl is probably Nancy Thompson from Nightmare on Elm Street. And the reason I respect her the most is that when it comes down to it, to the final battle with Freddy, she doesn't try to use her muscles. She uses her mind. She thinks. She sets all those traps, and I think that's so much better than going toe to toe, muscle for muscle, blow for blow. My favorite slasher, individual installment is Scream. I remember when I saw Scream in '96, I then saw it 6 times after. I saw it 7 times in a row, because all the homework I've been doing my whole life was the test. I felt like I hadn't been wasting my life, And
totally.
yeah, I mean, of course, I love Halloween '78. I like the new trilogy too, but I think actually the slasher franchise that has stayed the most honest to itself is probably Final Destination. I think it has
That
always
is
done.
such a good point. Yes,
it really has.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love those.
No, they're so good. I mean,
Same.
Child's Play has been pretty honest to itself as well. If you like Excise, Seed and Bride, then I think it does a pretty good through. I'm nothing against those, but they tone wise don't quite fit with the rest. But Final Destination, it knows what goods it's being asked to deliver.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's fun. It never stopped being fun either. The original kills in every Final Destination is what everyone is excited for every time, and they outdo themselves every time.
They do. They always have some version of the I'm following a log truck on the interstate. What's going to happen?
Oh my gosh, yes. So it just forever changed the way all of us drive.
It does.
Well, okay, so what's your favorite Final Destination?
Oh man, probably 3. I like 3 a lot.
Oh, the roller coaster.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah. How about y'all? What's y'all's favorite?
Mine's definitely 2.
Yeah.
I had to leave the room for 3 when they're on that roller coaster because it's so. I was so terrified.
I think 3 is mine too, but it's because I love roller coasters, and there was something about it that added an extra thrill to every roller coaster I went on after that.
Yeah.
Oh, what if I die?
I remember.
If I die?
Yeah, I saw 3 the afternoon, the Friday it came out in a matinee, and it was just a packed house, wall to wall. I was in Austin, Texas, I believe, and when it went over, everyone stood up and clapped as if the director and cast were there. We were just all so thrilled to have had this experience, and I love it when you can hit a screening like that, of true believers.
Yes. Yeah, that's so exciting. Yeah, I still remember when I saw Scream for the first time too. I was 16 and I was like, Sydney's a girl. I remember what I was wearing to the theater too. And it was that exact same thing.
Nice.
What a memory. Yeah.
It's when you have that kind of experience, it pulls you in, and I think you just kind of become a slasher devotee,
I think it is. And, hopefully people are experiencing that again with Freaky, Happy Death Day, It Follows, with all the new slashers, it makes me so jealous that there's people who are walking into the slasher genre via Happy Death Day or something, now that's just so wonderful.
Such a great franchise.
So much to experience, Well, and so, as we're reading these, I love all of the nods, I'm a fan of Silent Night, Deadly Night also. And so, that plays a part in Don't Fear the Reaper. How did you structure this? I want to ask about kind of your creative process. Did these references come to you as a part of the story or did you kind of outline them?
No, never outline. They spring up. And, I learned that I did a novel in 2006. Well, I wrote it in 1999. It came out in 2006, Demon Theory. And that book has just as many references as Chainsaw and Reaper and Angel, but it puts them in the footnotes mostly. And I realized once I was doing those footnotes that I couldn't write to the footnote. I couldn't write to the reference. I had to I had to write the characters in the story and let what footnotes come up. And that's what I did once I got to Chainsaw. I let just as triggered by, Jade's associations, that was basically where the references went. And, there's all those lists. I see those lists on Letterboxd of people who sift through these 2 books so far and kind of pull out all the films and put,
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I don't have any way to check if they're accurate or not because I didn't keep lists myself,
This kind of is rattling through your head, and then just come out.
I would sometimes have to jump over to IMDb to make sure this was 86, not 87, because sometimes I'm foggy on that stuff,
I felt like I could feel those conversations with yourself as an author when sometimes Jade would question herself and say, oh, wait, it was 86, 87. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I feel like he was having those conversations with himself. And I really
I'm glad you can hear that. And I did let Jade make some mistakes too,
Yes.
Yeah, like in the first one, nobody ever calls me out for it, but she makes a mistake about Halloween, and it's always fun for me to say something that's just a shade away from true, but it's still definitely wrong. It makes me feel like a fiction writer, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think for someone my age, I just said I was 16 when Scream came out. So, anybody who's good at math can tell how old I am.
Mm-hmm.
But I formed a lot of these memories before IMDb existed, and I swore for years that Vigo from Ghostbusters 2 and the bad guy from Kindergarten Cop were the same people, the same actor, and nobody could prove me wrong. Yeah. And so I love that, it's just a piece of kind of the storyteller. It's a piece of who Jade is. I can tell it's a piece of who you are, and I find myself that's how Stephen King is for me. I just find myself talking about Stephen King in random parts of the day. And half the time people don't even realize I'm doing it, Yeah. But I love, I definitely came away with a couple of slashers that I haven't seen yet too. And
I did as well. I'm glad to hear that someone's made lists on Letterboxd because that's going to make this much easier. But yeah, I wanted to also talk, since we were talking about the structure. So you have interludes in each book. It starts with Chainsaw with Jade's essays, and then the Baker Solutions here in our final book. And what made you think to do these? I love that they continue. When I got to Reaper, actually, I was like, I really hope this continues because I loved that in the first book, but I know there were no more essays left. So you came up with something for every novel so far.
Yeah. No,
or so far they're over.
Yeah. And though it was tricky to do the third time around, the second time around, it was a little easier because I was able to play with, for 2 or 3 of those interludes, I was able to play with who's doing this, and I was able to do tension in a different way, which was really fun. But Jade's Slasher 101 essays and My Heart is a Chainsaw, they didn't show up until, I would guess, about a month or 5 weeks before the book was finalized.
Wow.
And then I wrote them all in a rush, and they were each about 10 or 12 pages long. And then I gave them to the editor and my agent, and they said, these are fun, but you're just indulging yourself. Nobody's going to listen to you talk slashers this long. And they were right. So they said, you've got to cut each of these down to 2 pages. And so I made myself do that, except for 2 of them. 2 of them go over 2 pages, if I remember correctly. And that was heartbreaking, but I understand that it made the story move a lot better if I wasn't letting Jade go on and on and on. If you don't put a cap on Jade, she will go on and on and on, And so I had to do that. But and then in the second one, in Reaper, I found that it was a different way I could pour exposition into the story, which was really fun, because Jade isn't going to sit there and ruminate upon proof rock history, but someone writing a history report could, and then in Angel, I had to go even beyond the history report format and forge into new territory, it was really tricky. I had to do a lot of research to figure out how to produce the kind of reports these are and how to kind of adopt that really restrictive language. It wasn't natural, but I think the Jade essays, the Slasher 101s, they were the easiest of anything to write. And the Baker Solutions and Angel, they were probably the most difficult to write.
The tone shift is, it really feels like, I really enjoy going from the fervor of Jade to the Baker Solutions and just seeing almost in themselves, just the interludes themselves have evolved and changed through the years of the books, and even if you just read those, you could really understand a lot of these books. I mean, with with Chainsaw, that's how I really learned Jade right off the bat was this is who she is, because you could feel, it's so funny you say they were rushed, because I can almost feel that from Jade, this this fervor of, I'm writing this at 1 a.m. in my bedroom in, just because I need these extra points and they don't make any sense, but they make sense to me. And they're a little rambly, but in the most beautiful teenage girl way. And and then you get to the Baker Solutions, which are so serious. And it's this is it. Here we are at the end,
Yeah, no, it was.
And again,
No, I mean, it was really fun to do that tone shift, like over the course of 3 books, because the trick is what I was kind of messing with is reader expectations. Because in book 2, they were expecting Jade to do the interludes, and then once it wasn't,
I thought it was Jade for a little.
I did too at first.
Yeah, but that's a good point, that you can see Jade the best when she is writing like without the filters on, and but of course I couldn't do that for Angel because she is the one narrating this book, so her filters are already off, and like listening to Jade for nearly 500 pages, that's like drinking from a fire hose, So we needed some breaks. We needed some breaks in there.
Yeah. Well, and there's one, another kind of tone shift at the very end of those solutions that, again, I was already crying, but, it's just so sweet.
That part you're talking about, that surprised me. I know that was going to happen. I had no idea. Yeah.
Oh. Well, the whole role of teachers, I think, surprised me. That's another thing I wanted to ask you about. I'm a former teacher. I know you're a teacher. And, I think it's such a beautiful relationship we see with Jade and, the history teachers, some less beautiful than others. And I don't want to spoil anything, but we have a new history teacher when The Angel of Indian Lake opens. So can you talk a little bit about the role of teachers in this trilogy and just kind of how your relationship with teaching, being a teacher, being taught?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the role of teachers over 3 installments, I realized really quickly that I was basically doing, what's it called in Harry Potter? The dark arts teachers, who
the difference of the dark arts teachers and new ones every year.
Replaced every year,
Which I thought was wonderful. I thought that was a wonderful trick in that series, and so of course I had to steal some version of it for myself. But yeah, like in the first one, Jade has a father, but he's not a dad, he's not a good dude. And Jade doesn't have a mom. I felt like she needed a parent figure of some sort, and that was too much to lay on one person. So I kind of thought, well, maybe Hardy and Holmes, the sheriff and the history teacher, can kind of both be surrogate fathers in a sense, and because Jade needed that, she would fight it, she would never admit it, but she needed that. And but then of course, because it's a horror novel, you don't get to keep everybody, which broke my heart, But as for the role of teachers and, teaching in classes and students and all that, I think I was just really fortunate. I think I say this in the acknowledgments to Reaper, possibly, to have some teachers who really changed the course of my life, and I wouldn't be here right now if people had not done things for me that they didn't have to do, And that's kind of, teachers, you don't teach for the money, because
no, you sure don't.
No, but I don't even know if it's the satisfaction. It's just like I think teachers kind of realize they're a part of the community and they can help move us all forward, and to me, that's a very meaningful relationship. And yes, I am a teacher myself. I don't know if I'm a good teacher or a bad teacher, but I have a lot of fun and,
Yeah. And I think it's kind of like how we were talking about Jade, like it's just this knowledge is pouring out of her. And I think, people that are natural teachers, they do that and they want to share what they've learned and they want to help the next generation move forward. I also want to ask about parents. So
yes,
when I started crying in My Heart as a Chainsaw when the mama bear and the baby bear on the dam.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a beautiful image. Then there's another, image or element in Don't Fear the Reaper with an elk and with Jade's mother. And then I don't want to spoil anything about the ending of this book, but parenting and parent figures play a heavy part in it. And again, I was just sobbing at the end of this. I thought it was such a beautiful way to end the story. And on page 53, which is at the beginning, you write, you don't measure moms in height though, you measure them in ferocity, which I just I just wanted to tattoo it on my heart. And you also write about parents in The Only Good Indians. You write about parents in The Babysitter Lives. And the idea of surrogate parents, because I think a lot of the parent figures we see in these stories are not biological parents and they kind of step in when they're needed. Can you tell us a little bit about this theme and how the role of parents and kind of guidance plays a part in the story?
Yeah, I think like when you think about you tell yourself, I'm going to write a horror story. I'm going to tell a horror story. I want to do something scary. The first question you have to ask is, what's most sacred to you, you know? And so what can you put in jeopardy? And for me, family is most sacred, you know? And so I had to find ways to both put that in jeopardy, but also when the seesaw goes the other way, to make it to let it, I don't know, move towards some sort of heroism via sacrifice sometimes, I guess, you know, because you know, I wonder if this all comes from Bruce Springsteen in one of his live albums, and I forget which song this is for. It may be for that one about he has a song, there's a house on the hill, and his father would always look at it. And I think he does a rambling intro for that song. He talks about when he was young, he didn't understand why his dad seemed so beaten down for life. And then he got older and he realized that his dad did used to have his own dreams, but then he had kids and he realized those kids were his dreams, you know? And I think that just lodged in me deep, you know?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask a little about some of the villains of your books, especially Stacey Graves and the preacher Ezekiel, who are fantastic villains with so much interesting lore. Did you, when you first sat down to write My Heart is a Chainsaw, you've already told us, though, that you weren't really picturing a trilogy, but did you have any idea that they would become such a big part of the overarching story? Or were they just going to be a little bit of lore in the first book?
They were just a little bit of lore in the first book. I had no plans whatsoever, you know? I mean, I think my editor made me aware of this more than I was aware of it. He said with Chainsaw, I was kind of inverting the Indian burial ground thing, you know, and making it a Christian burial ground. And I think when he said that, I was like, I wonder if that's something I can use, you know, but because I don't really think about things when I do them. I just do what feels right, you know. Like I think for me, thinking is so unhelpful for writing. Feeling is what you need for writing. Yeah, I mean, thinking is good for revision, but it's no good for getting feelings down on the page, you know. And for that reason, I never can plan.
Understand.
I never can plan or outline or know what's happening. I really agree with Neil Gaiman. He says sometimes he'll be writing something and, you know, at 20-25%, he'll drop something in there that he doesn't have any idea how this is going to plug in or how it's going to develop, but he just has an instinct that this might matter, you know? And that's exactly how I write. I do things and it's just instinctual and I'm like, this will probably be something, but I have no idea what, you know? And I think if I did know what, I would mess it up. I would telegraph it. I would signal it too hard. You know, it's gotta ambush me at the end as well as the reader.
Oh, definitely. Especially with Ezekiel, I feel like in Chainsaw, it could have just been Jade kind of going off about some town, you know, mysteries and lore and never mentioned again. And that would have been fine. And it didn't feel like, that's why I wanted to ask, because it didn't feel very planned in a good way. In a good way, it didn't feel like I'm going to put this foreshadowing here now, you know?
Yeah, like that, that's a good way to say it. Because I feel like I never foreshadow, but I do when I'm trying to figure out, like in the last 20% of a novel, when I don't know what's going to happen, what I do is I go back and I look at the previous 80% and I realize, oh, this, and this, they can add up to this and we can get there, you know? And, and it doesn't always work out, but, the more I write, the luckier I get, you know?
Yeah. There you are, like making those connections, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I find, I always think about Stephen King's on writing, talking about like a fossil, like a story is like uncovering bones that were there, you know, and I love hearing you talk about like being surprised by elements of your story. And I think that's what makes it feels so emotional, you know, and I mean, I'm engaged with the plot. I want to know who done it. You know, I got to know who, you know, when the part in the gym, when he just smiles, I was like, who is that? I've got to know who is it. But I'm also connected to the emotions of the characters. And I think that's part of kind of what you've said, like that writing discovery.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I agree. I think that this trilogy really, you've really touched on so many elements. I mean, it tugs at your heartstrings. It brought up traumas for, I think, so many people who read it, including me, and in a good way. It really helped me work through that teenage girl I was. It really did. It's and on top of that, you've created such a gruesome world of slashers in such a beautiful way. I mean, you really did not stray away from it being a bloodbath, which I really appreciate. You know, I really appreciate this overall trilogy of gore and family.
Yeah, well, thank you. No, that's a good way to say it. Gore and family. I like that. But you're right. Like to me, you can't have the good if you don't also have the bad, you know? And yeah, I could just make it all kind of like fake scary, like safe scary. And but I don't know that I don't like to read or watch stuff like that really where it's safe, you know? I think that's one of the most essential components of horror actually, is that the reader, the audience, feels like they're in a place where the rules don't quite hold, you know? Like the horror writer, I feel like the horror writer's job is we take the reader by the hand and we lead them through a doorway into like a big darkness, and we're holding a light, a candle, and we take them 20 paces in and then 5 more paces slower, and then we let go of their hand and we blow the candle out, you know, and they don't know where the walls are, and that's when you're doing horror, I think.
Yes.
I love that. Well, and I love, you know, slasher. I'm a slasher fanatic, and so I love the formula, and I love kind of dissecting it. But I always think the best slashers subvert the formula in some way, because you're right. If it's just like by the books and you're just going down the checklist, there are no stakes. You know.
I agree.
I want to ask, in your acknowledgement, you mentioned the Books in the Freezer podcast and the Final Girl playlist, and I know Stephanie also. She's a friend of mine. And I added Alanis Morissette's "You Ought to Know" to that playlist.
Nice.
Yeah, which again tells probably listeners how old I am. But can you tell us some of your Final Girl songs? What do you think Jade's favorite Final Girl song would be? And how did that kind of sustain you as you were writing this book?
No, well, the way it sustained me is for each of these books, I make a playlist, and I only listen to that playlist while I am writing this book. And it kind of conditions me such that every time I hear the opening beats of the first song on the playlist, that I'm there, you know? I'm on Spotify right now looking at my playlist, and of course having the usual difficulty, you know? You can probably hear me typing here. Here it is. Yeah. You know, the song on this, I use the same playlist for Chainsaw and Reaper, but then when I started writing Angel, I realized that playlist was used up, that I had to come up with some new stuff. And so, yeah, I kind of stole a lot of that Books in the Freezer, Stephanie's playlist that, you know, she lets all the gifts add to. And then I added stuff. I'm looking for here it is. The song on this playlist that I associate most with Jade, that I think she would like the most, is Hailstorm. I Like It Heavy. HALE Storm. I Like It Heavy. And just the attitude in that feels very Jade Daniels to me, you know?
I love her.
That is amazing. I love that. And I know what you mean when you said by the time after Reaper, it was used up. Like, because I do playlists when I write too, and there is something that's inherently like it. Yeah. I don't even know how to say it out loud other than it feels used up.
Yeah.
You need to start anew.
But then I was so surprised that for the last little, I don't know, I think I say it in the acknowledgments, the last 15% or 10% or something of Angel, the playlist I had been using felt empty. And so I had to go back to the original Chainsaw and Reaper playlist. And that was like a nostalgic return. And I think that let me end it like I needed to end it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I've heard about that, like making mixes. I mean, I think about it as mixed CDs because, again, you know, I am a child of my age. But the music that you listen to a year in your life, and you put it on, and you're just immediately sucked back into that time. You know.
Yeah, no, for sure. For me, it has to be music that I know really well, because if not, I'll listen to it. I need to be music that just like prompts a feeling, you know.
Yeah.
Oh,
but you can still hear the words coming in your head, you know?
Mm-hmm. You can see it playing out as a scene in your head. Yeah. Definitely. I had one question for you about writing, actually. So my show, I have a lot of fairly new people who are writing horror fiction. Is there any advice you have for new horror authors? Like, are there any tropes that you wish people would stay away from or that there aren't enough of?
Let me think. I think I don't know. I would say don't stay away from anything. If it feels real to you, then it's real. But I would say that what we need out of all writers, and this probably especially goes for new writers, is what they're afraid of. Like don't write about spiders because most of the world's afraid of spiders. Write about you're scared that if you fall asleep, an old woman is going to come lean over your bed and breathe your breath. That kind of stuff. We need people's particular fears, and that is what scares us the most, I think. I mean, you let a jar of spiders go on somebody's lap, they're probably going to jump and scream, but it's going to be a lot more meaningful if this is a fear this person has been living with for a long time. I guess if I can use me as an example for My Heart is a Chainsaw, for this whole trilogy, the Indian Lake Trilogy. When I was in junior high, first discovering slashers, we would watch them out in my friend's garage, which was out in the trees, and his dad would come scare us at a certain point, and we'd run out the side door and think he was chasing us, and we would only be safe if we jumped in the creek and head under the water, and that's specifically what I built Chainsaw out of.
That's specifically what. Yes, exactly. That's so crazy. I had no idea that would have been based on a real. The image of Stacey Graves clawing at the top of the water, and that being inspired by something real is amazing. That's so fun to know.
And it's so funny because I think when people, it's not funny, it's terrifying. When people write about their specific fears, like it unlocks a fear you didn't realize you had.
It does,
and it allows you to kind of like let it out.
It totally does. Yeah, like we didn't know showers were terrifying until Psycho,
Exactly. I know.
Yes.
The world will never be the same.
No, and we didn't know log trucks were scary until Final Destination 2.
But I mean, seriously, can you drive behind a log truck now?
No.
Well, I did want to ask.
I was saying, I think semis, they're always mad about people tailgating them. I think they should start. They should start painting or putting decals on their back door of the butt end of logs.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I saw a truck one time, and it had it was some kind of optical illusion where it looked like the doors were open.
Yeah.
And I was
I've seen those.
But I couldn't stop looking at it either. I was like, I've got to get away from this truck. I'm going to have Final Destination.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask, what's next for you? And do you think you'll ever attempt anything this ambitious again?
A big trilogy like this? Yeah, I don't know if I will or not. I've always wanted to do like a Lord of the Rings kind of thing, but probably in horror. So maybe I have with Indian Lake. Maybe it's done now. I don't know. If I do another trilogy, it won't be for a while anyways, because I got a lot of standalone stuff to do. Actually I'm doing a comic book that comes in a trilogy, True Believers. I just wrote the third installment of that.
Oh, wow.
That was really fun. It's a slasher trilogy. But next for me, I am not sure what my publication schedule is. I don't really keep up with that as well as I should. But I believe I have 2 books out next year, 2 books out the year after that, and I know that somewhere in that mix is the Buffalo Hunter, my vampire novel. That actually before I got on with y'all, I was in the last little movement of that, so I can send it to my agent, so she can then give me notes, and then we can send it to the editor, and it can come out. And
that's exciting.
Yeah, and a time travel science fiction thing, which is the most brutal thing I've ever written by far. It's worse. I
love time travel.
Yeah, Least of My Scars has always been my most brutal thing I've done, but this one actually goes a step beyond Least of My Scars and really to Uncomfortable Spaces. Everybody may hate me after this one. Probably justly, but it's science fiction. It's not horror.
You're doing something right if you're horrifying,
Hopefully.
Yeah, I'm very excited now. Holy shit!
You've got to go into. If you don't go into dangerous spaces, if there's no risk, then what are you doing? It's no good.
Exactly.
If you play it safe. You're not gonna hit on anything good. I think.
Exactly. And I think, to kind of maybe bookend it too, I think, I always hear Randy Meek saying, that means anybody can die. Like nobody is safe in this book. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so beautiful, and to see the way that it wraps up, knowing that, that's because that's life. We're not safe.
No, we're not.
And we're as safe as we can be. And, everything ends at some point.
Yeah. And we kind of have to spin up fantasies that make us feel safe. But at some level, we know those are fantasies too, like I tell myself, our ecosphere is not going to collapse in my lifetime, but that's just a thing I tell myself. I don't have any idea.
Yeah. But I feel like the more afraid I am, the stronger I get every day that I have to deal with that fear. And I think that's what we see Jade go through every book. She puts herself back together. She gets a little bit stronger. And now we see her strong for the next generation.
Yeah, definitely. One of my favorite things about Jade is how she doesn't hide her scars either. She confronts the world. She confronts the world with them. She makes the world deal with her as herself. She doesn't do things to try to appease people, and I think that's probably the thing I respect about her the most,
Yeah, same. I love it. She's just so unusual and so inspirational, and
she really is. She's fantastic. I'm going to miss her. I really will.
Thank you.
I know.
Thank you. No, I'm going to miss her too. I've been thinking about getting a tattoo right here on my wrist to kind of commemorate,
I think that'd be great. Yeah. She is a part of you. So, Well, is there anything else you'd like to say about the book or the trilogy before we let you go? We've kept you for so long now.
No, I'm happy. It's been great talking with y'all. Anything else about it? Let me think. I really like when you see these three on a shelf. I like how it goes from white to red to black. That feels like a natural progression.
Yes. I have mine lined up on my shelf just like that. Yeah, I love it.
It's so cool, and we didn't plan it at all. So it's so cool that it worked out that way. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for being here with us today. We will let you go, and everyone please go buy this trilogy. If you haven't started it yet, start it now, and you're going to binge all three of them, I assure you.
Yes. Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
It's been wonderful. Thank you for hanging out with Jade.
Well, thank you for giving us Jade.
Thank you for giving us Jade. Well, that was fun, and that was incredible.
That was amazing. Oh my gosh. It is so cool. Like when you meet people that you love, you're always a little nervous. Like, are they going to
Yes, I was very nervous going in.
I was too, because I just love his books so much. But man, he was so nice. And he's just a horror fan like us too. It was so fun to just nerd out.
It felt like being at a convention and nerding out with a fellow horror fan, honestly. It was just what a conversation. I feel like we got some really fun behind the scenes that the two of us are such huge fans of this trilogy that I feel like both of us were. I mean, I know I was fangirling about a few of those conversations, like hearing about the creek and the visuals being under the water and how that was an actual thing that he would do with a friend. And oh man.
Oh my gosh, that was so cool. I know it's like, I love like seeing the pieces come together and hearing like how he made it happen. And like hearing about the interludes and how those were like final additions to the story.
Exactly.
They feel like tentpoles along the way,
They do. I would have never guessed those were last minute additions because like you said, tentpoles, they feel like they were there the entire time. I would have almost guessed that was one of the first things he thought to do before anything. I mean, 5 weeks out from publishing and to add those, and then they become such a huge part of all three books. I mean, they tell a story in themselves,
Yeah, exactly. And I think we can really like see the evolution of Jade through these. And it's so nice to like see her from the outside, but to really get to know her on the inside too, Exactly. And, I told him I cried. I mentioned that a couple of times. Did you cry when you were reading this too? Or you
God, of course I did. I mean, I cried from book one. I mean, the big massacre in book one, like he said, you've got to kill people. You have to do it. And from the jump, I mean, I know we're talking about book three, but really I'd like to talk about this trilogy as a whole, because I'm sure so many people listening right now haven't started the trilogy. And from book one, no spoilers, but it's shocking how far he's willing to go with an entire town of people.
Oh, I know. It's like really no one is safe. And I've got Stephen King in my head saying like, kill your darlings, even if it breaks your heart, kill your darlings, because that's what makes it feel real. You know, that's what gives us the stakes for it. So
exactly.
Well, I can't praise this book enough. I really loved it, the entire trilogy. So listeners, if you have not listened and you know what, the audiobooks are fantastic too. And like, as we mentioned at the beginning, we just got news that there are going to be a lot of really
very
well-known horror names. So, and that Stephen Graham Jones is going to be voicing at least his acknowledgement, maybe a little bit more too. So, you know, check out the book when you can and check out the audiobooks because audiobooks are great. I will sing their praises.
Audiobooks are great. They're really, I underutilize them. You and I were talking about this as well off camera. I underutilize audiobooks. They're such a great way to consume media, especially, again, with these voice actors that we know are coming up in this third one. You cannot skip this. I mean, and this third book, it's so hard to wrap up a trilogy. It's so hard to wrap up anything. I mean, we all know how disappointing the ends of shows the last episodes of our favorite series can be, but this was not that. It was so satisfying. It was a beautiful wrap up. Jenn cried. I cried. We cried, but it was also satisfied my bloodlust like no other. It was perfect.
Which is that's what you want from a slasher. That's what you want from a trilogy. And that's what you want from horror. You know, it's just it's given us everything, you know.
It gives you slashers. It gives you, we talked about supernatural. I mean, it has a little bit of everything. It really does. He's
got the fear and the feel, you know.
Yes, exactly. Thanks again for joining Jenn and I for that fantastic interview. Remember, you can pick up your copy of The Angel of Indian Lake today, wherever books are sold.